Well, hello, everyone. Hello. Hello, everybody, and happy day. My name is Susanna Briscoe-Alba, and I am the lead career strategist at Dunamis Coaching and Consulting Services. And today we're going to be talking about overcoming toxic workplaces. Listen, if you've ever had to deal with a toxic workplace, I want you to drop a me in the chat. If you've ever had to deal with a toxic workplace, I want you to drop a me in the chat. And I'm really excited today to have this conversation because I get to have it with a beloved friend of mine. So as you are coming into the room, hey friend, hello. Listen, if this is your first time here, I want you to drop a 1 in the chat. If this is not your first time here and you've been rocking with me, I want you to drop a 2 in the chat and let me know where you are watching me from. So 1 if you're new and tell me where you're watching me from, and 2 if you are not new. Okay. And tell me where you are watching me from. If you are watching me on the replay, I want you to comment #replay and let me know that you are here. For those of you who are commenting twos, help me to welcome the ones that are in the building. So thank you so much. So we are going to be having a conversation with someone who I love dearly. And we're going to be talking about toxic workplaces, how to deal with toxic bosses, how to identify toxic environments during the interview process, what to be paying attention to, and how to overcome this level of toxicity. Because that's one of the questions that you guys have been asking me a lot in my DMs is how do I identify a toxic workplace? How do I overcome a toxic boss? How do I get out of a toxic environment? So I am going to bring my friend on. Her name is Budy Jamilly Whitfield, and she is an expert, y'all. She is a therapist, but also an expert. And I am going to bring her on all of the places. Hey, friend. So we are
Hi.
on Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube, and IG. And so I am going to bring her on live on IG as well. So, Budy, if you can, let me see if I can find you, honey.
hmm I
But
see you
I'm her
live.
on IG as well. So let's see. All right. So I just sent her the invitation. So Budy is, again, she's an expert at what she does. And what I love about being able to connect with her is that she's going to give you real tea. Okay. So if you're ready, I want you to type ready in the chat and we're going to get into it. For those of you who love
Yay.
my frames, thank you so much. I love y'all right back. Okay. I am going to do a whole nother segment on my glasses. But for now, we're going to talk workplace and workforce development. So if you can hear me well and see me well, just drop a 1 in the chat and let me know. If you can hear Budy and see her well, I want you to drop a 1 in the chat as well.
Hola, hola.
Budy, why don't you get us started, honey? Introduce yourself, tell us a little bit about yourself, and then we'll get into subject matter.
Absolutely. My name is Budy Jamilly Whitfield. I am a licensed clinical social worker and I've been in the field for over 19 years. Every year that my son turns a year is the year that I've been in the field. I have my own private practice called Beauty is Mine. So I help women who have experienced trauma, anxiety, and depression really heal through some of those circumstances and life transitions because we all go through life transitions. In addition to coaching professional women who struggle with a lot of self-sabotaging behavior. I have been in leadership positions for, my goodness, over 15 years of my career. And so toxic work environment is something very familiar to me
Sure.
for many different reasons. And I think today, as I was pondering the conversation we were going to have, what kept coming up for me is how are we not looking at ourselves? Reflecting that mirror within ourselves to identify
Ooh.
toxic patterns. And I'm going to tell you why. And I know I'm jumping in hot, but we like to be
Listen,
humble,
do
open,
your
transparent, as we
thing.
say.
I'm here for
But
it.
I'm going to tell you why. The reason why I say this is because if you find yourself in a pattern working in different positions, you could be in the same company, but working in different positions
Sure.
or in different job hopping
Yeah.
and struggling with the same interpersonal skills. Sis, you got to do some work within yourself.
Come
You
on.
have to see if you start complaining like, oh, this coworker did this coworker did that, my boss did this, my boss did that, and always a blame game, always looking at people who you could reflect and place blame on, and it's everyone else's fault except for yours. You're
Yeah.
part of the toxic work environment culture. You can't
Ooh,
sit here and blame everybody. You're part of the toxicity. Like you reek of toxicity at this moment.
yeah. And you know what's really interesting as we're talking about that? There are a lot of people who are in leadership roles who who are exactly what you are saying, right? And
Hmm.
so it's almost like they go from one toxic environment to another.
Yep.
And mysteriously that previous environment just all of a sudden gets like wonderful to work at.
Yes. Think about it. I was talking to a friend of mine and she was saying, my boss went away for 6 weeks. And in those 6 weeks, productivity rose.
Yep.
People were happier. People
Yep.
were more productive.
Yep.
People were just more engaged. At some point, we got to kind
Yeah.
of reflect the mirror and figure that out. Like, what is following you? What are
Sure.
some of your performance evaluations that still come up as areas of opportunity for growth?
Yeah, for sure. For sure. And not only like identifying what are those areas, but what are you actively doing to change that?
Correct.
Because once we've identified it, it's not enough just to identify it. We need to be able to actively change what it is that we're doing if we're going to
Hmm.
be the change, right?
Hmm.
Um, and what I find so interesting when we're having this conversation over toxic workplaces, I think we mislabel things as toxicity because
Hmm.
that's the lens through which we are looking at everything. And may I
Hmm.
submit to you that it's probably not toxic there. It's just that perhaps you have arrived. And like
Yeah.
I don't want to on anyone because there is the truth of very toxic environments.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
I have worked at some, I have been under some of that
Me
type of
too.
leadership, but there
Hmm.
was also a very real point where I had to get to a point where it was like, okay, Susanna, it can't be everybody and not you. And it got to a point where I was like, okay, well, maybe there was something about me that I needed to adjust. And I will tell you that for me, what I found was that I was expecting other people to give me affirmation and give me feedback based off of based off of only the good areas, right?
Right.
And did not want to confront head on the areas that needed growth.
Right.
And then the other aspect of that too was the reason that I had gotten to such a high level of toxicity within was that I missed all my markers and I let people go past boundaries that led to my
Mm.
burnout
Mm. Mm.
because I believed the lie. I'm gonna say I believed the
Yeah.
lie that if I just put my head down, people would notice and they would like recognize my work. And what I realized was that if I put my head down and just did the work and hoped and prayed that somebody would notice, they didn't. They just gave me more work.
Mm.
And
Mm.
so the boundaries, it wasn't necessarily that they were crossing the boundaries, is that I had blurry boundary lines.
Talk about it though.
I had blurry boundary lines because it
Talk
was
about it
like
though.
it's faster, especially when you get into leadership. It's
Yes.
faster if I just do it. I didn't want to take the
Yes.
time to develop someone. It's
Right.
faster if I just get it done. And that follows us not only in the workplace, but it follows us kind of everywhere that we go.
It follows you at home. It follows you with your friendships.
Yes,
It follows you in your relationships. If you look at where you fall into the sibling pattern profile, the expectations that were placed upon you
sure,
in your familial culture, because
sure.
every culture has their own culture, and in your subset cultures, that then follows you. Of course, it's easier just to get it done because it's going to get done and it's done timely.
Exactly.
But then you mentioned something very important, and I see a comment coming up is the burnout piece. Then that happens
Yeah.
because now you feel expense. Now you feel like I have a team. Well, why do I have a team like that? Then it goes back to that mirroring effect
Yeah,
where
for
we
sure.
then start placing blame on other people, though they can't get it done. But pause. Did you take the time to train them, to develop them in
Yeah.
order to get it done? So
Yeah.
before we start shaming and blaming someone, I'm going to give you well two things that I think is important to talk about with the
Let's do
burnout
it.
piece. Um, 2 years ago, I decided to take family medical leave. from my job because it really affected my mental health. And
Yeah.
even as a licensed clinician, working with people, training
Yeah.
people, supervising clinicians, supervising directors, etc., it didn't matter. It really impacted my mental health. And when I tell you I was not showing up as my optimal self,
Yeah.
my there was a part of me that was burning and dying within. And so I showed up in meetings with an attitude. You added another project to my plate. And I was like, well, I don't have to, it was one of these things,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
So you start perpetuating in a
Yeah.
leadership role what people then assume to think about a Black and brown woman, right?
Yeah.
This thing that comes in, right?
Yep.
And so it took a toll on me where I was being received then by further upper management as not invested, not a
Mhm.
good leader, has an attitude problem, et cetera, et cetera. But no, it
Mhm.
wasn't until I literally had a breakdown where I was like, no one is stopping to ask me if I'm okay. Out
Yeah.
of all the years I've been in this organization, where I've outperformed with all of my metrics, has anyone stopped to say, are you okay?
Yes. Can we
Because
talk?
this
Can
is
we
not
talk
you.
about it? Can we talk
Yes.
about it? Because a
Yes, we
lot of
have to have those conversations.
yeah, a lot of the people who follow us, like if you follow Susanna Alba, you by
Mhm.
definition are a high achiever, right? Because you would not want to be getting a six-figure role. Like you would
Right.
just be happy where you're at. But if you are a
Exactly.
high achiever, the reason that you want a six-figure role is because you know that you do good work. And so
Correct.
pay me what I'm worth. But in the same token, I think a lot of it, what happens with us, specifically women and women of color, is that
Mhm.
we have been almost conditioned for what is known as the good giver syndrome. Like we
Yeah.
need to be the good girls and we need to be able to outperform everybody and we need to be able to just make sure that everybody feels comfortable, be palatable,
Say
don't
it.
don't make anybody uncomfortable. Make sure
Say
that
it.
you're working twice as fast, twice as hard, be twice as good as everyone else. And this comes from this independent woman culture,
Mhm.
which
Mhm.
there's to a degree nothing wrong with that. But when it starts to infect, that's what it is. When it
Yeah.
starts to infect the reality of who you were created to be, then you find yourself always having to be hard. And in the
Yes.
wrong environments, in the wrong environments, like toxic environments, then you're constantly in a fight or flight mode.
Yeah.
And so you cannot see opportunities for what they are because you're so like there's so much going on within.
Yeah.
And I
Internally, you feel like
yeah,
a combustible, like you're about to implode, not even explode. You're about to like just implode because you keep adding and adding, and then there's these
sure.
layers, and then there's these things added. But I think we, as BIPOC women, we have to work harder. We have to show up as our best self. The
Yep.
way I was behaving at that time I was burnt out was very similar to my white counterparts and how that's just them.
Mhm.
But there was growth for them and executing and further leadership. But for
Yeah.
me, it was like, well, you're not taking on these projects.
Okay,
You're
okay.
resistant.
Okay. Okay. Now let's break this
Yeah.
down. Let's break this down because this is, if you're not familiar with what she's talking about, this is called mirroring. And
Yes.
for some of us, especially BIPOC women, when you start to mirror your white counterparts, it's not always well received because what seems assertive in some spaces now
Mhm.
looks combative in others, and
Mhm.
you are just trying to decipher or again mirror what you're seeing.
Mhm.
And so I can tell you from one who has held a leadership role much like yourself for a very long period of time, it
Yeah.
becomes really interesting to show up as your best self because then you're not sure how you should operate.
Right. You're like, if I'm bright and excited, you're doing too much.
Right.
If I'm quiet, what's wrong with you? Well, which one is
Right.
it?
Can
Which
we
one?
pause right there? Because the whole reason why I created the Scale to Six Women's Conference, which is
Mhm.
coming up, and Beauty is one of our speakers, y'all. So if you are
Oh,
enjoying
we're
this,
gonna
you
dive
need to be
into it.
there. But the
Mhm.
whole reason that I created the conference was because I remember what it was like to go to conferences in
Yeah.
this body and get information And people would just be like, well, why aren't you smiling? Aren't you enjoying it? It's almost like you had to be on all of the time.
You have to be like this.
Yeah. And like, I just got a whole lot of information that my mind is still trying to process, that I'm trying to think through. How am I going to be able to implement this once I get back to work? And so at the Scale to Six conference, when you come, like for those of you who are coming, we can't wait to meet you. But we want to create those environments where you don't feel like you have to perform just to be in the room. Right. What has qualified you to be in the room is who you are, the value that you innately bring. And that's one of the things that I find tends to ring true in certain toxic environments, where you feel like you always have to be on, where you feel like you always have to have the right answer, right? Like you just cannot be yourself. Or you know that you're in a toxic environment where, well, when physically you start to come like panic. I was about to start speaking in Spanish, but you start to like panic surrounding what do I say? How do I share it? Am I being
How do I show
real?
up? Is it too much? Is it too loud? Is it too quiet? Is it too, should I say this? Should I not say this? Should I allow them an opportunity? If they say something, then maybe I'm not, if I jump in front of my boss, are they going to say that I'm being disrespectful, or I'm actually part of a team player and I'm not letting her sink? Like, it just we already filter so much information. Sure. As human beings, we filter so much information throughout the day, thousands and thousands and thousands of megabytes of information, and we have to kind of decipher what comes out. Could you imagine, as a woman, as a leader, as a Scale to Six figure leader woman, and a BIPOC woman, that you're just even filtering more stuff? Is this? How can I show up? What can I do this? So you're literally like, picture yourself under the sea with all the little fishes coming through, and you're trying to decipher, well, which way do I go? Which way do I go? Which way do I go?
And like what there's not enough conversation surrounding our women is the cost or the sacrifice of breaking through a glass ceiling.
Yeah.
Right? Because we hear a lot of you should break the glass ceiling. Women are breaking the glass ceiling. There is a glass ceiling. And what I love about our speakers is that each of us in our perspective rights have broken through a glass ceiling, but we don't hide the fact that there have been scars and wounds that we've had to succumb to, or sacrifices that we've had to make in order for us to break through.
Yeah.
Because it's not easy to not only break through the glass ceiling, but also want to bring people along with you.
Yeah.
Because again, our counterparts, when they get hired into new roles, 9 times out of 10, they already know who their team is. They're bringing people in, right?
Yes.
And when we get into new roles, I think what's really interesting is once we start to operate in that way, it must feel like, or it has to be something like, well, maybe they just were friends. Like, it's not like you were smart, qualified, have all of the things, but it's just like, oh, well, they're just friends. So she might not even really know what she's doing. And it's like, wait a minute.
I'm qualified to be here.
Beyond, like, I could run circles around you. So let's tone that down by several notches. And secondly, give me the space that I need. Because what's interesting that I find too in toxic environments is that, especially for women of color, is that you get into a leadership role and you become the new shiny object, right? It's like, where do I put you? It's so much fun. All of a sudden, everybody's like, hey, friend, hey, sis. And then the moment that you start doing the job that you got hired to, you are aggressive, you are combative, you are a problem. You only hire people who look like you. And it's like, that's not at all what's happening. But people get into their fields.
Yes. People get really, really deep into their fields. They make a lot of projected assumptions, and they also have to learn how to manage their own ego state. Because if you think about, we spend the majority of our time at work.
Yeah.
At work is where you might meet your spouse, your bestest friend, or your biggest enemies, either one. But you spend the majority of your time at work, and then you spend less time at home.
Yes, you do.
And so if you see those patterns, those behaviors, they're important to pay attention. One thing that I always say is I'm an observant
Yeah.
person. I might be like, hey, how are you? But I am very observant of how people are showing up. And what I see is a lack of emotional intelligence in so many people who come to work. There's a huge lack of emotional intelligence.
Can you educate us? For those who may not know what
Of
that means,
course.
can you educate us on what emotional intelligence in the
Yeah.
workplace looks like?
So emotional intelligence is really your ability to look within and identify emotions that are going on with people. It's you to be able to have tough conversations with your employees, with your bosses, with peers, with coworkers, be part of projects without jumping in with an attitude, without being aggressive about things, without being upset, and understanding how you're showing up, how your
Right.
communication style is impacting or affecting the overall growth of the organization, your team, your peers, et cetera, et cetera. And so having emotional intelligence is your ability to take a step back and say, hey, you know what, yesterday I had an attitude when I was talking to Susanna, and I'm gonna go back and I'm gonna check that. And I'm gonna go circle back and be like, hey, Susanna, I had a bad day. And we're all human. It happens. It
Yep.
happens. Hey, Susanna, I'm so sorry that I had an attitude yesterday. It's not about you. I got a lot of stuff going on at home.
Yep.
Susanna, being emotionally intelligent, is able to say, hey, girl, I know that's not you. That's not who you are. And I didn't take it personal. That's emotional intelligence duality. Now, it's different if I had an attitude and Susanna was like, catch me outside.
Yeah. You gonna catch these hands.
Let's go. You gonna catch these hands. Catch me outside. 5 o'clock. Parking lot.
Right.
Down the road. Very different, right?
Right.
It's Susanna's ability to interpret and say, hey, you know what? That's not how beauty shows up.
Right.
This is not what she does. Let me have a conversation with her.
Right.
That's emotional intelligence. It's also recognizing certain things. And I'll tell you, we all make mistakes as leaders because we're human. We can be emotionally based, and that's part of toxic work environments, is that sometimes we could become an emotionally based leader, meaning you're making decisions off of how you feeling today. And that creates the toxic work environment, because if I came on some and I had an argument with my kid and my family and I'm not feeling good about my life because I haven't addressed my long-term mental health issues, I'm coming to work and you're my target today, Susanna.
Yep.
All of a sudden, now you're not performing.
Yep.
All of a sudden, I'm gonna pull reports on you and see how you're showing up to work and what
Yep.
you're doing, and see your metrics and see your KPIs and see if you're valuable enough to keep you. The other part of toxic work environments and also emotionally based leadership is pay attention when there's budget cuts. All of a sudden, you're not a good employee. When they need to make a decision as to who gotta go, and you were thinking about yourself and your friend, all of a sudden, Susanna's the target now.
Yes.
Now I'm gonna have to cut Susanna's position because I don't really know if we really need her, because her team has been able to do this. She went out on leave for a few months, and you know what? Basically, we assessed that we can live without her.
Yep.
Even though what they didn't recognize is Susanna does the job of 4 or 5 people.
Right.
The other thing is they make decisions giving folks thinking, hey, someone left. You could supervise this program, you could lead this, you could lead that. And then all of a sudden, and pay attention, it happens to a lot of us BIPOC women. All of a sudden, you leave that position, and now they've hired 3 people to do your job.
Come on. Beauty, you teaching.
I'm preaching today.
Oh my
I'm
goodness.
preaching and teaching today. It's all the things that happen that creates a toxic work environment. So we look at ex-employees that'll look back and be like, hold up, I did 3 jobs and now you got to hire 2 people to do exactly what I was doing. But when I told you I was drowning, I looked crazy. When I told you that this wasn't okay for me, that this was an impact for me, I was seen as not being a team player. I was seen as being disrespectful. I was seen as spicy. I was seen as this. All these projected assumptions that you've had of me. But now all of a sudden I've removed myself and you're like, hold up. We need a few people to do this. That is disrespectful to the person who was holding that position.
For sure.
All those different things encompass toxic work environments. And here's one thing that it takes chutzpah, it takes real grit and determination for a leader to take the mirror and say, damn, what am I contributing to this?
Yeah.
How can I change this? How can I make myself better to then in turn be the best leader that I can be.
And it's
Because it's not about you all the time,
yeah,
baby.
no, it's not. And it's what I teach about leadership in terms of leaders lead with an open hand, meaning that they create environments where their people are free to go at any time. But
Right.
because you have invested well into these folks, because you have done the work to make sure that you are good, you've created now an environment that's sticky. So while your hand is open and they can leave at any point, they choose to stay because of the environment that you've created. And notice how my hand is open and I'm putting something on top. When you have someone, a team that feels like they are supported, the way my hand is supporting my other hand, they don't want to leave that.
Right.
It also takes a certain level of leadership to identify when you've reached your capacity to be able to support effectively. One of the things that my team used to run into quite often is that they would see new opportunities and I'd be like, listen, go for it.
Right.
And it's not that I'm trying to get rid of you. It's just that I have reached capacity to be able to serve you well.
Right.
And I know for sure the company's not going to pay you what I know that you big A. So let's make this work for you. Because the other part that I think through is legacy. And I know that not too many people think that same way. But you never know when that opportunity could then come back and surprise you in some way. Because you were able to lead with an open hand and provide a door or make an introduction. Later on, that individual is like, I remember Susanna did that for me.
Yes.
I remember Susanna helped me with that. So
it's a small world. You don't know. You can go to this conference, scale to 6, guys register. Susanna's going to drop the link.
Yep.
You can show up to this conference and then realize like, hey, I know you. Interesting enough, super quick. Someone that I know through other meetings that we've been through for programs that we oversee was like, hey, I'm going to scale to 6. How you know Susanna? I'm like, because Susanna's mom.
Yeah.
You know, it's a small world. You never know who knows who. So you also have to show up as your best self wherever you go, because that can follow you. Again, people leave organizations and work elsewhere. And if you're within the same field, you can be asking someone for a job and you be rude and nasty to them. Like, we have to think about your title doesn't follow you in the supermarket. You don't go to the supermarket and they're like, oh, they're the CEO, they're the VP, they're the AVP, they're the director, they're this manager. That doesn't follow you at the supermarket. In the supermarket, you're just the woman or you're just the man.
Girl, you
humble yourself.
You teach it. You saying all the things, but that is so true. And like that's one thing that I wish more people understood, that you never know when you're going to run into individuals like this again. And man, the common phrase is people will forget what you know. They'll like forget your title, but they'll never forget how you made them feel.
Right.
And one of the things that I find so interesting is that I will run into people, and I'm going to say this, but I'm going to share some information with y'all. People will remember me, if you've been under my leadership in any given way, they will remember me one of 2 ways. One, as the supportive individual who helped you to move on, to see better for yourself. But then also they will, if you have bad behavior, they will also remember me as the person who did not tolerate that. I was not afraid to pull that out. And if I had to let you go, which 9 times out of 10, I don't want to get to that point.
Correct.
But if you push me to that point, as the leader, I have to think through, am I still creating an environment where the rest of the team can still feel seen, valued, heard, and equipped? And can they continue to grow? If the response to that is no, then we are no longer a good fit. And it's not that I don't love you. It's not that I don't want to see you grow. It's not that I have something like against you. It's just that right now, this is not the good fit for you. And so I would much rather, I'm very picky about the environment. I'm very picky about that. Down to the way that I interview people. which is why I teach y'all how to respond to interview questions. Because as a
Yeah.
hiring manager, I'm trying to pay attention. If I've created a culture where people are thriving, I want to be very mindful of who I'm bringing into that culture because it only takes one.
Mhm. Mhm. It literally will only take one to be toxic and poison. And I think we've all experienced it, even as leaders. You know, when you have to have tough conversations and you have to either part ways with an employee because things didn't work out. When I tell you your name gets drawn
Oh,
to the mud, to the sea, to the ocean, to the next part of the universe, you're the
all the
worst thing
things.
since sliced bread. You're just like the worst of the worst of
Yeah,
the worst. That's that person's experience. That's what you experienced of me, but you got to reflect that mirror within. What did you contribute?
yeah,
Because it can't be on me. I could take ownership for my stuff,
right.
but what did you do to get you where you at?
And let's be a little bit even more reflective. How is it that you are the only individual who's having that problem out of a team of 25?
Exactly. Exactly.
Why is it
I
that?
always say, you know what's interesting? Pay attention to what people come and say. One of my positions that I had as a director of a program, I remember somebody was being so shady and tried to throw their peer under the
Yeah,
bus. First week I was there, proing them so that she can uplift herself and I wouldn't pay attention to her
yeah,
because she had a likable personality, etc. And kept throwing this peer under the bus. And if I didn't have the gift of discernment, I was like, you know what? Now I need to pay attention to you. For the simple fact that you're throwing someone, that you have such a bad character that
yeah,
needs improvement to throw someone else on the bus, baby, what are you hiding about yourself?
yeah. And in common,
And what did I discover? Fraud. I discovered so many different things within the first few months where it was just like you were pointing the finger at someone else to take the heat off of you. Have the gift of discernment because it's easy as human beings for us to fall into that gossip realm,
yeah,
that judgment realm.
yeah,
If someone comes to you and is always like, Susanna this, Susanna this, Susanna that, make your own judgment before you take what they've said.
for sure.
Make your own assessment.
For sure. And one of the things that I was just having this conversation on a one-on-one with someone yesterday because we were trying to identify are some of these positions and some of these environments real and good for them. And I told them pay
Right.
attention to the fruit because if it's established, it's going to yield fruit. It's either
Mhm.
going to yield good fruit or it's going to
Mhm.
yield bad fruit. And the
Yes.
easiest way that you can do that is with a quick Google search. The
Yes.
same way that companies do background checks on you, you could do a quick Google search with said organization. Because right now, nothing stays hidden under the sun. Nothing.
No. Everything is TikTokable. That's my
Exactly.
name today.
Which is like
Everything is TikTokable.
it's good, but at the same token, it can be highly dangerous if you are not
Yes.
wise in what you're looking for, right?
Correct.
So can we talk about like how do you as a woman of color or how have you,
Mhm.
right? Because you'll be teaching us at the conference, how have you instituted mechanisms for you to be successful in identifying these toxic environments and or working with toxic individuals? Before you answer that question,
Mhm.
I'm gonna give you some time, y'all. If you want to register for the conference, you're going to comment the word on IG, you're going to comment the word conference, and Susanna the bot, my assistant, will send you the link for you to be able to get information on the conference. It's happening June 25th and June 26th. Beauty is going to be one of our speakers there where we'll be teaching you. Right now, we have an intimate group. And I can't wait. I can't wait to pour into the women who are going to be there. Other things that you
Awesome.
should know is that if you comment conference and you're like, oh, I need help with this, scroll down to the FAQ section because we want to make sure that you can submit a letter to your employer so like that they can help you or sponsor you to attend the conference. So when you go to the conference page, know that we are giving you as much resources as possible so like that you can attend the conference either paying out of pocket or having your company cover the cost for you. Okay, all right, so back to my question, Beauty, do you need me to repeat it?
Yes. No, no, no.
Okay, go.
How do I identify toxic culture, and then how do you work with
Yes.
toxicity in a culture in a work environment? I think the first thing in paying attention to identifying toxic culture is seeing patterns.
Mm,
If do you find that within this team that you're supervising, that there's a high turnover rate. There's always a reason why people are leaving. Paying attention to those high turnover rates are really important. Looking at employee performance is also something else that you need to work on. If you're not happy, you produce less. You're less motivated.
Yeah.
Are people from your team jumping in to look at new initiatives, to try to start up new things, more invested or involved, or really want to look at professional growth and development? Looking at those things. Are you developing future leaders in your team? You have to think, or are you keeping people stagnant? Because part of toxicity is there are managers that are very selfish and prefer to keep their team stagnant and make them above everyone else. It goes back to hire people who are smarter than you because they can help you. They're not your competition.
Right.
No one is your competition. If you're and you feel one of your
you've not learned enough. You've not learned enough. One of the questions that, so for those of you who are watching, if you are in the interview process, I would ask a very specific question to get an understanding of what Budy just said. My question to be able to assess what type of leadership I'm going to be walking into is, can you tell me about the recent success of one of your team members and how did you help them achieve that? I'm going to say that again slow in case you need to write that down. Can you tell me about the recent success of one of your team members and how did you help them to achieve that? The reason that I ask that question is because, number one, I'm placing emphasis on recent. It shouldn't be that there was a team member that I had 15 years ago and they went on to do something amazing. No. I'm talking about your recent team.
Yeah.
Because it should be relevant the same way that your resume and all that other jazz should be relevant to the role that you're applying to. The successes should be relevant to the recent team that is there. And I also want you to be mindful that recent successes doesn't always need to be major successes. But what challenge did you help them to overcome recently? And how did you help them to do that? Because if you cannot do that for me, likely I am not receiving the support or the coaching that I need. And notice the difference between coaching and hand-holding. It's one thing to coach someone. It's another thing entirely to hold their hand.
I want to piggyback on that question also to ask in an interview is what is your leadership style and how do you help support your employees with professional growth and development? That's also another way of saying, how are you going to supervise me and helping me grow into the next level?
Yeah.
That's important. So I'll get back to the identifying thing. I think also, besides identifying organizationally and with teams, etc., you have to do some of the work within yourself. Introspection is super important. You could be here on this live. You could go to Scale to Six Figure. You can get all this information. Susanna's dropping gems on a daily basis. You could go on your job interviews. You can look at your best resume, the best interview process. But are you carrying that garbage bag to your place of employment?
Yeah.
Put on a show, but then you get there and then you're messy.
Yeah.
Then you get there and you're out there gossiping. Then you get there and you're out there doing things or sabotaging people, or you're having this jealousy phase where you want to see where someone else is, instead of being motivated to be like, yes, I want to be the executive director, I want to be the executive leader of this. Instead of you focusing on how do I get there with professional growth development coaching, instead of you stepping on people's necks and saying, well, they didn't do this, they didn't do this, they didn't do this, they didn't do this. You got to look within yourself, because you just no matter who you are, how much you do. If you have not worked on these behaviors, you're going to continue to find yourself in these toxic patterns.
For sure.
So that introspection piece is super important. If you guys check my post for today, I have 5 questions you can ask on how to identify for work and some of the way you show up toxic in a work environment.
Yeah.
Now, working in a toxic work environment, there's a It's either you give up some of the concerns to your to your leader, etc., on what is impacting you, it's really
For
But
sure.
before you make a decision to go, you gotta work on yourself
Yeah.
because it might be you.
Yeah. And it might be the need to unlearn some of the things that we learned while we were younger. It might be time for us to unlearn some of those things. I'm gonna pause quick because I'm seeing comments that people are getting feedback, like they're getting large feedback. If you can hear us and see us well, can you type a one in the chat? Can you hear us and see us well across the platforms? Can you hear us and see us well? We got 15 minutes, and I want to make sure that in the next 15 minutes you can hear us well. So if you can hear us well and see us well, drop a one in the chat. Please, please, please. Okay. All righty. So
Just ask the question that I said, what's your leadership style and how do you support your team members with professional growth and development? That was what I had said.
yes, beautiful. And that's where I wanted to come next. So I wanted to make sure that you guys could hear us. So I want to make sure that you can still hear me across the platforms. But I guess my next question to you, my love, is in these kinds of times, how do, like, give us a little tease of what people can expect when they come to the Scale to Six conference and they come to learn from you.
I think I've dropped a lot of different teasers, but I think because of my mental health background is really digging in the ugliness of within ourselves in order for us to stay up to the highest successful person. Is that going to last, and have you had a lot of team members leave? So just identifying some of our own behaviors, how we communicate. Communication is so key.
Yeah.
It's not what you say, it's how you say it.
Ooh, talk now.
Always pay attention to that. It is not what you say, because we can both say the same thing. It is how you say it and how it lands and received.
Yeah.
And the other important feedback is being open and receptive to feedback from others. There's nothing wrong with you going up and saying, how do you feel like I'm showing up for you? What else do you feel you need from me?
Yeah.
There's something humbling about
that. The other thing is recognizing when you made a mistake, and this goes back to the emotional intelligence, and course correct it. As we use the example is to say, hey, Susanna, I checked in, this is not how you really are certain days.
Is everything okay? Or, hey,
I apologize for speaking to you that way. I'm having a rough day.
Yeah.
It's being able
to recognize those things in order to really prepare you for your next level. It is
work that's difficult, but
it's not work that is undoable. You can do it.
We all got into this space
by either hiring a coach, hiring a therapist,
tuning into personal development,
strengths assessments, you name it. Everyone is hungry, and I see the hunger right here in this live. People are hungry to get to the next level. You have to be able to
do some introspection. You get some of those teasers and some of
that hands-on approach for you identify what things hold you back
in order to leap you forward
for all the information everyone else is.
Yeah, for sure. And one of the things that you just mentioned is making sure that, like, you have, making sure that you are ready to receive that type of feedback.
Yeah.
Right. Because we live in a society where giving constant feedback is the expectation. And it should giving constant good feedback. And it's like, not everything that I do is good.
Not everything, right. And that's a problem. If every time I'm coming to you, Susanna, it's like, Susanna, you didn't give me that report on time. Susanna, you didn't do this. But you know what? Susanna's at work till 8 o'clock. Susanna's the first one here. Susanna keeps the team motivated. Susanna is what keeps things afloat. And if these 2 times Susanna's not doing, do you have a lot on your plate? Can we disseminate the work to someone else?
Yeah, for sure. So I'd like to open the floor for questions. Does anybody have questions that you want to ask either myself or Jamilly? Jamilly, honey, thank you so much. It's always so good to connect with you.
Yes. You know,
I love it.
The energy.
I love it. No, and
and you guys better be at Scale to 6, because if this is only live that you see this energy, I am extra animated in person, 5'3" with some heels, and I'll be extra animated that way.
So listen, if you are on IG, if you comment conference, we will send you the information for you to be able to join us at the conference. There is, under the FAQ section, we have prepared a letter for you so that you can give it to your employer so that they can sponsor you to attend the conference. This conference is going to be for women of color, for women in general, specifically for women of color, because that is our lived experience. That's what we can speak to. But we want to make sure that you are equipped to be a good leader. We want to make sure that you get your confidence back. A lot of what I hear from our women of color is that they have lost their confidence because of the way they've been mistreated, or because of the way that they are showing up in the workplace. And so we want to make sure that we equip you with those things. We also want to make sure that what you are learning in the conference is not something that just feels real good in the moment, but then you can have the practicality to apply that when you get back to work. You want to know why, y'all? Because your employer is not going to sponsor you to go to a conference and not expect to get an ROI. So you have to be able to make those connections in terms of, if I go to this conference, what will be the return that I can actively implement when I get back to work? And so that is what we want to make sure that you receive. The other thing that I'm going to address is that for my non-melanated sisters who feel like this message has been for them and they still want to join us at the conference, my love, you are welcomed here. So long as you are comfortable learning from women of color and you are in fact trying to be an ally and not fight. Okay. So I want to be able to share my heart with you, because I understand that our experiences might not be the same, but it's not too late for us to make shifts towards a more positive working culture. So we're going to dive into questions quick. If you have a question, use the question bubble. We're going to answer your questions, and then we're going to wrap this up. So the first question, Budy, is how can you go about not talking about personal business in the workplace when management is trying to do icebreakers? Personal information tends to backfire on you. Ooh, ooh, ooh.
I think it's okay to politely say, I love participating in icebreakers. And I think the next one, I would be more motivated to bring in other questions. At this moment, I'm not comfortable sharing certain things about me. And it's nothing that is to impact the work environment, and not to go to that extent, but it's just really saying at this time, I'm not comfortable. And so I would be happy to bring about other questions that doesn't make it so personal at this moment.
Yeah.
Because people might be wanting to get to know you, but they nosy.
Yeah. Yeah.
Nosy and messy, because the minute you say something, oh, did you know so-and-so is this?
For sure. For sure. I would say if you are in the middle of an icebreaker, and they're asking you about your personal information, my love, to me, that would be a red flag. That would be something that
I did a live on this, actually.
Huh?
Didn't you do a live on this? Or you posted something about it?
Yeah,
I remember.
that would be a red flag, because how is that personal information relevant to the role that I'm going to be doing here? It's one thing to want to get to know about the things that I like and enjoy. It's another thing entirely for you to want to know about my personal, family, business things that are going outside of the workplace. And if that is what you feel is necessary for an icebreaker, that's what I think. So that's what I would say. All right. Next question is, when in toxic environment at work, should we inform HR? When in a toxic environment, should you inform HR? I think there's going to be what Budy said, making sure you have a certain level of discernment when it comes to what you are going to share with HR. The reason that I say that is because, having been a leader, HR is going to come to me to see what is the complaint, or what steps have been taken based off of what you just shared. So how do you combat that, especially in a toxic environment? I encourage you to make sure you have an evidence list. Keep track of the work that you are doing. Keep track of who you are collaborating with and what has been the outcome. What conversations have you had? What has been the expectation of said relationship? Because once you get to HR is going to ask you for feedback and data. And so if you don't have that information, then it becomes more of he said, she said, or she said, she said, right? And so I'm always going to caution on the side of data for the sake of your own safety, because HR is there to mitigate risk for the company.
Exactly.
I'm going to say that again. HR is there to mitigate risk for the sake of the company. So you need to make sure that you are preparing yourself to mitigate risk for the enterprise of who you are. All right. What do you think?
I completely agree. I'm also, I'm an email hoarder. I got an email for that.
Yeah.
When I requested, what was the feedback, what was the attitude, what was not the attitude. And, that's data. That's data formulation. But I also say if it feels safe, you have to reassess your safety. If it feels safe to do so, have a conversation with the person. Bring it to their attention first before you go to HR. And I'll tell you why. It circles back to what Susanna was saying, is that it is risk for the company. And if you kind of haven't told that person saying, hey, Susanna, I feel as if I'm in a toxic work environment for these reasons. I feel that I'm being devalued. There's microaggressions going on. I'm tired of being asked about my hair, my clothes, my shoes, my this. There's all the evidence. And what I need you to support me with coworker, I think I'm being dismissed.
Yeah.
And here's how
can we
have to address this.
Now you tried. This is tried that route, but you're also gathering your own evidence, because if they didn't show up to those one-on-ones, they didn't agree. Now you go to HR and say, hey, I spoke to my boss about this. This is what I'm experiencing. These are the microaggressions, and I've asked for one-to-ones and I'm not getting them.
And I am going to just share from my personal experience, because I don't know how to talk about anything else other than what I've lived through. So I knew that there was time that it was time for me to shift out of a certain environment when I went from having hour-long one-on-one conversations with my direct supervisor to then things shifting all of a sudden, and my one-on-ones went from an hour to an half an hour to 10 minutes to I'll call you when I'm ready to never seeing me again. That is a sign.
Let you go.
That is a sign. And it wasn't that I wasn't doing my job. I was trying to do everything that I was called to. So much so that I was even putting an email like, hey, I need feedback on here. Can I have some of your recommendations here? And I knew that it was time for me to shift, because instead of coming to speak to me, they were doing and planning and scheming behind my back. Now I'm gonna break this down more at the conference, because I don't feel any type of way towards this organization, but I want it to be a learning experience for everyone, because I want to give you framework as to what to do. And HR was very much a part of this conversation. But the reason that I tell you that HR is there to mitigate the risk of the company is because I've lived through it, y'all.
Yeah.
So make sure that you have the opportunity to collect your data, to collect your feedback, because you could be the high achiever, but you lose your flavor and they'll be looking for somebody else. Okay. So I hope that answered your question. Question here is, what do you do as an HR professional when you're experiencing a toxic environment? I would say if you are currently in HR, there's a couple things that I would encourage you. Never underestimate the power of community. So never ever underestimate the power of community. And the reason that I say that is because one of the ways that you build community is like at the conference, right? But another way that you can build the other reason why community becomes so important is because I may not have the same HR background, but I for sure know what should and should not be done. That's number two. That's number two. And then the other thing is surround yourself with other successful HR folks so that when you are experiencing something that is out of pocket, you have a sounding board that you can run things through, even if they don't work at the same organization. In fact, I encourage you to connect with someone who is not in the same organization as you but holds the same function, because they will be able to sharpen you and put you onto game, same way that you will be able to sharpen them and put them onto game. So when you are the HR professional and you're surrounded by toxic behavior, I'm going to encourage you to broaden your reach in terms of who you are connecting with. There's a really great account here by Sierra, who's a friend, and she's incredible. And it's called Caged Bird HR. She is an incredible resource for you to pay attention to. Sierra knows HR policy inside and out. And so it's at Caged Bird HR. If you are that type of HR professional and you're looking for guidance surrounding how to be successful within human resources, Sierra and her team are the people to connect with. Beauty, anything you want to add?
I was just going to add, I think just for clarity, if you're the HR person witnessing the toxic work environment, is how do you bring that feedback back to the executive level to look at their organization and organization leadership, and perhaps hiring a consultant to come in and address some of those things, because you do kind of get stuck in HR where you keep replacing for these same teams because they have all this turnover and you're witnessing that it is toxic, but nothing is being done towards that person. So I think just for me, it's just identifying that clarity piece. If it warrants having more of a conversation with an executive level in order to turn that around. Now, with legal HR, again, doing this session and then identifying if it's time to go.
Yeah. So I'm gonna drop that company in the chat right now. You could tell her Susanna sent you. She's gonna be like, this girl. But Caged Bird HR is her at. And they will be able to kind of guide you through that because that's their wheelhouse. The last question that we're going to take is surrounding, okay, so my boss is one of a kind. It's a small private healthcare practice, and she's made racial microaggressions. She's told me, how do you lose weight so fast? By shutting up. It's not just me. This happens to everyone. I need to leave, but any advice on how to deal with her? Woo.
Okay, let me just process, because first of all, that is very microaggressive, and because it sounds like a small private healthcare practice, it makes it difficult, because it sounds like then the boss that you have might be a part of the healthcare practice. It is unhealthy for you. It is not a good thing. I think if you do feel comfortable to do so, because you also gotta make sure that they pay you unemployment or whatever, you have something in the back.
Right.
In case you need to take legal action, is when you document these things.
True.
What are the company's policies? Usually when it's a small practice, they don't have good policies, but do they have a policy against microaggressions, racism, etc.? I think if they do have a policy, then you refer to that and say, hey, I feel as if I am in this kind of work environment and I do not feel safe because of these things. The company has a policy. If you're going to find yourself in other kind of legal battles, etc., with your documentation, and you made this comment to me, and it was okay. And then you said and that was okay. Now you started almost like a paper trail.
Don't mess with me because
I have been documented that this is going on. And that's they don't change unless someone is able to listen to them, take that feedback, and make an organizational change. It's time for you to go, because it's going to impact your mental health. At some point, you're going to then start thinking those negative and horrible things that they say about you, and it's going to impact how much you'll be able to shine in your next place of employment.
Yeah. And I would say if you've already been documenting it and like it's not changing, then there has to come a place where not that you stop documenting, but now you start thinking through strategy, because how much longer am I going to stay subject to this, right? So this is why if you follow me, I'm constantly giving you strategy. I'm always telling you, don't take yourself completely out of the market, because there's always an opportunity for you. If it's a small, what I have learned from small kind of private locations is that very much what Budy said, it's going to take a dynamic shift. And more often than not, it's going to have to start from the top down instead of from the bottom up. Because from the bottom up, what they're just going to say is, we'll just hire more people. But from the top down, it's going to be like, yeah, we've had enough. We're restructuring things, and this is no longer going to be tolerated. You know, and there's only but so much, I'm sorry. There's only but so much, we'll pay you. There's only but so much, oh, she didn't mean it like that, or he didn't mean it like that, or there's only but so much, oh, you're just being sensitive. There's only but so much of that you have to be willing to take. Okay. So you have to get to a point where it's like, okay, I'm drawing the line in the sand, and I am going to start to strategize what my next opportunity is. The other thing that I would say, that once you have entered that strategy mode, keep your personal business personal. Once you have entered that strategy mode, keep your personal business personal.
Yes, zip it.
Don't share that information with anybody else.
Remove them from Facebook, from Instagram, from TikTok, unfollow, and block.
And I can tell you that as a leader, I did not follow my team on purpose, nor did I let my team follow me. They got really offended when I told them, oh no, the reason you can't find me is because I've already blocked you. Now, once I left out of that situation, you could follow me. My page is public, like we could be friends. But while we are employed, we are not friends. So I will love you through work. I will encourage you. I will support you. I will do all of those things. But what you're not going to do is try to leverage my personal business in your everyday conversation. I haven't written a book yet, so I should not be the topic. Okay. So I think that it needs to be that when you get to that point of you knowing, okay, this is time for me to leave, and it's time for me to strategize, keep your personal business personal, and activate your network. Like, again, shameless plug, we are going to teach you how to do these things at the conference.
Because hit conference on the chat, hit conference on the chat, hit conference on the chat. Because so many gems.
Yeah. If you caught nothing else from our live today, I want you to remember this. Struggle does not need to be your standard. Struggle does not need to be your standard. This is why we host events like this. So like that, you are equipped instead of burnt out and struggling all the time. We want to break that off of you. Okay. So if you are in a season where you are looking for support, we gave you a couple of things that you can do. Okay. If you're in a season where you're trying to overcome toxic environments, where you're struggling with having conversations with HR, where you're not entirely sure how you are to show up, go back and watch this live, because we dropped a whole lot of information for you. Please connect with my friend Sierra at Caged Bird HR, because she's going to help you to strategize from a very strategic HR perspective. Like, I'm not going to recommend someone to you that I don't think would help you. And make sure you follow Budy as well, because Budy is also going to give you context from a mental health perspective. And she's also going to help you to pay attention to, if this is happening to you mentally in this type of environment, these are the strategies that you need to implement so that you can see success. Because one thing that I want my audience to always be aware of is that I don't want you to give up your life for an organization. I don't want you to give up your life for an organization, because what will happen is that the organization will have a 10-second moment of silence should something happen to you. And within 5 seconds, they are going to post your position and hire someone else.
Absolutely.
And your family is going to be the one who will struggle and miss you. So struggle does not need to be your standard. On this live, we gave you some incredible tools for you to use. Beauty, I'm going to ask, my love, if you can drop your IG handle.
Yes.
And we'll pin that so that people can connect with you. And thank you. Thank you so much for those of you who joined us today. I hope you got several gems out of this conversation.
We came in a little hot, so I hope you guys okay and fed, because this was a workout.
We wasted no time in making sure that you are equipped. And if you want to join us and you're watching us on IG, comment the word conference. We will send you the details. Beauty is going to be one of our incredible speakers. It's going to be a small, intimate group. And the reason that we're keeping it small is because we want to make sure that we pour into you effectively. And that, again, we want you to feel good, which is great, but we want you to be able to implement what you've learned. Okay.
You're making an investment, and your company is making an investment in you. And I think it's important for you to take that there's so much wealth of knowledge and value, and that the women who are speaking, myself and the other speakers, are incredible women with a wealth of insight in so many different fields. Susanna was so strategic in how she came along and picked her speakers, because she wanted people to walk away. If you are going to scale to 6, this is how you're going to get there. It doesn't matter how much I tell you how to interview for a job or how to write your resume. This is exactly what you need to do to scale and stay.
Yep. In a practical way.
Yeah.
So it's not just about getting your seat at the table, it's making sure that you get your seat and your voice is heard.
And you network. People don't know that we have a network thing going on the day before. So, get to know a friend, bring a friend, and tell a friend. All your friends need to scale.
Absolutely. We'll be hosting the Women's Networking Gala. We're going to be dressed to the nines in our favorite kicks. So it's a sneaker ball. So wear your favorite sneakers. Make sure to check out the site. Get as much information as you can. Beauty, always, my love, a pleasure connecting with you.
Thank you, guys. And thank you to your followers. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much. All righty, y'all. So this is going to be saved. We're going to upload it to my page. If you missed it here, you can see it on YouTube, on LinkedIn, on Facebook. Where else are we, Jesus? We're all over the place. So Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube, and IG. And I hope that this was impactful for you today. Thank you for your time and attention, and we will catch you on the next one. Bye, everybody. Have a good one.